Hello and welcome to the Apologetics 315 podcast with your hosts Brian Auten and Chad Gross. Join us for conversations and interviews on the topics of apologetics, evangelism, and the Christian worldview.
I think we better split up.
Good idea.
Yeah, we can do more damage that way.
Well, welcome to the podcast. How you doing, Chad?
I'm doing well. Looking forward to this interview.
And we've got a great friend joining us today. It's been some time since we've had him on the podcast. We have interviewed him before, but much has changed since those many years in the world and in the blogosphere. We're glad to have him back. None other than Wintery Knight. Shall we call you Wintery?
That's good, or you can just say Knight or
Mr. Knight.
Mr. Knight.
The Wintery one.
Yeah, you were being interviewed, and they were referring to you as like the Batman of apologetics.
Yes, on another podcast. Yeah.
Do you wear masks? Or you sleep in a cave? What is this?
No, just try to keep I think everybody is beginning to understand nowadays why it was wise to have an alias if you're going to speak out on controversial issues. So I like to discuss like moral and ethical issues, and that's not always welcome in today's world of I would say being very emotional and not being able to disagree without being disagreeable. So I need to be able to earn money to be able to partner for the gospel, like Philippians 1 says, with other Christians and so on. So I need to be able to earn a living. It just is easier for me to say what I need to say without opening myself up to the wrong kinds of attention from the other side.
Well, we see plenty of this sort of cancel culture, if you will.
Yes.
When did you first start seeing that on the scene? Because, I mean, you kind of knew that was a danger at one point, but when did you think that started to change? I'm asking you this question because you seem to have your finger on the pulse of everything going on culturally as it relates to Christianity in the public square and that sort of thing. So that's one of the things we'll talk about today. But when did you see that sort of shift happening?
Mid to late 90s in the country that I was living in at the time. I was completing my education in the country that I'm from. And at that time, we were seeing the sorts of things that you guys were seeing in the mid 2010s, say, with Christian bakeries and Christian florists and Christian wedding photographers. Those kinds of things were happening in my country in the mid to late 90s. So we had sort of tribunals where people who were offended by Christians acting like Christians and saying Christian things could be investigated and would have to defend themselves for the offense that they were causing other people. And so seeing that and knowing that I wanted to have an impact as a Christian, I immediately made plans to leave the country that I was in and immigrate to America so that I would have the freedom and the prosperity and the security that I needed in order to do what I needed to do.
Well, for our listeners, just so they know, Wintery Knight is not your real name, but it is where they can find every writing and blog post from Wintery Knight. That's winteryknight.com. So are you active in any other social media?
Yeah, I mean, I have a Facebook page. I actually have a backup Facebook page, and I'm on other things like Twitter as well, and increasingly starting to go towards other platforms like MeWe and Parler and so on, just because of the concerns I have about big technology.
Now, how long have you been blogging and writing now on Christian issues and topics?
I started in January 2009, and that was after some time trying to get things to work in the church. So I attended a few churches where I even attended a church that was pastored by a former student of J.P. Moreland. And what I would try to do is I would try to offer them good resources. I didn't want the spotlight and I didn't want to be the speaker. What I wanted to do was, because when I arrived in America, the first thing I did was go and get a pack of audio cassettes from Veritas Forum, Integrated Resources, Reasons to Believe, Access Research Network, Stand to Reason. I have a collection of like 250, and this is before the days of, posting these things on the internet. So that's how I got interested in and getting good at Christian apologetics. What I wanted to do was offer those kinds of resources to the church. We have wonderful resources today. We have Stephen C. Meyer's DVD series with Focus on the Family. We don't need to do this. Like, we can just having a Christian in the church who's interested in this, we can bring in these resources, and they will speak very well for us with much more charismatic and intelligent and accomplished people. But what I found out was the church wasn't really interested in doing those things, not even as a small group or inviting speakers. So my home church in my home country, we brought out Greg Kokel and things like that. We have a better team there. But in this country, I actually struggled a great deal. So that's why I decided to start writing in January 2009, as well as there were some changes in the country at that time that caused me to think that I'd better start to help Christians to think through how policies would affect them, having experienced that in my previous country and wanting them to be alert, to the difference that policy makes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about, I think that is something that a lot of people, I know I've experienced as well, when you are enthusiastic about apologetics, you're enthusiastic about, saying to Christians, hey, there are a lot of great resources we can use here that not only bolster your faith, but also can encourage other people to consider the gospel. Then you share this kind of thinking, at least I know for me, I thought, oh, man, they're going to just love this. And then you kind of hit a wall, right?
Yes.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, that's the question I want to answer. Okay, so so basically 50 years ago, people were very oriented towards objective truth. And if you could make a case for objective truth, it was very easy in the more Christian culture to convince someone to become a Christian and to reprioritize their lives so that they were focused on, self-denial, serving the Christian God, following Jesus, and sort of making a difference that way and not really trying to be happy. But that's all been replaced. I think Frank Turek is the one who coined the term happiness quest. So now people are less focused on truth, and they're more focused on happiness or on having the autonomy to pursue their happiness quest. So basically, I think that has even seeped into the church a little bit. And so whereas when I was growing up, I wanted to get hold of the truth because I had kind of minimal parenting. And I was very anxious to get some wisdom to know how to live and what to do. I didn't want to make a mistake and hurt myself for lack of knowledge and for lack of wisdom. So I was very interested in getting truthful answers. And that was a different time than today. So when I stumbled upon Christianity, it was like, this is wonderful. If this is the way that the universe really works, then I want to conform to this. I want to enter into a relationship with God, and I want to have an enterprise for God, and that this is going to be ultimately what I was designed to do, what is fulfilling for me. And I will not be surprised by anything in the world. I will be able to achieve the goals that I set out to achieve, knowing how things work straight from the designer. Well, we're in a different time now. So people are more interested in looking inside to find what will fulfill them. I've actually dealt with people who have kind of shipwrecked themselves in various ways. So I've mentored a woman who had an abortion after she had sort of said, I'm an atheist and I'm going to make decisions about relationships as an atheist. And that led her to cohabitate with a guy who was an atheist. And then what happened was she found it was very difficult to get him to sort of act morally. And when she got pregnant, he sort of stepped out and she had an abortion being an atheist. And that kind of, her happiness quest kind of got shipwrecked. And so when she came to me, I said, so what is it that is wrong? And she said, I'm not good with men. I'm not able to choose men. Whenever I choose men, it doesn't work out. And I said, would you like to know the truth about who you are and how to handle that aspect of your life? And she said, yes, that's what I need. People keep lying to me. They keep telling me what I want to hear, and it never works. And I would just like to know, even if it's the harsh truth, I want to know what the truth is so that I can stop getting into these problems. And so that was the old way. The new way is people want their happiness, and they're very unlikely to come to Christians and say, tell me the hard truth so that I can stop doing this. What they're more likely to do is they're more likely to perhaps identify some group that's responsible for their problems, or maybe turn to the government for some kind of a subsidized program, or perhaps turn to the government to say, can you stop people from criticizing me for being wrong? Or, just in general, culturally shaming Christians for daring to speak up and saying, hey, I've got a better way.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer that?
Yeah. And I mean, I think too, what you said makes a lot of sense in the sense that when you come to a church, you're saying that these attitudes have kind of seeped into the church.
Yes.
And when you come to a church and you say, hey, we have these great resources like True You from Stephen C. Meyer, like you mentioned that, and we have these great resources. Yes, we have those great resources, but they also require some thinking and some hard work.
Yes.
And since we're really seeking after more of this kind of happiness, then we're probably going to gravitate towards something else, because that sounds like, it's going to require a little bit of effort on my part.
Correct. There's this one example I want to share that is from a Stand to Reason lecture given by Dr. Scott Waller, who works for Christian Leadership Ministries. And he gave a lecture on the Christianity at the university. And I always share this because this has been my experience. So he had a Christian parent who had sent his child off to college. And after one semester, the child came back as a non-Christian. And he said something like, I've begun to look at my life in this house as the dark period of my life. This is what the student told the parent. And the parent came to Scott Waller and said, what do I do about this? And Scott Waller says, well, it's very simple. Your child is encountering things like postmodernism, moral relativism, naturalism, and a variety of other philosophies at the university that he's never encountered before. And all you have to do is you have to read a few of these books, and I prepared them for you. Here's this one, and this one, and this one, and here's a stack of books, and I'm going to push them across the desk at you and say, if you read these books, then you will be able to address the kinds of problems that your child has been having at university. And the parent pushed the books right back across the table and said, I don't really have time for that. But if you could just recommend something quick that I could just get my child back on track, that is what I'm really looking for. So just what you said, Chad.
Wow.
This is the attitude. And this is what I've encountered myself at the university. I was there for undergraduate and graduate and was dealing with kids in Crusade and IVCF and Navigators. And we invited out William Lane Craig to debate. And we had a lot of other initiatives going on. And I had to deal with getting Christians involved and supportive. And their attitude was very much, I do not want to put in the work to do this. But like I said, if you're on a truth quest and your goal is self-defense and survival, which at my age, growing up poor in an immigrant family, it was, I just literally didn't have the support I needed to make good decisions, then you're coming to Christianity in a completely different way. You're saying, I need to know how the world really works so that I know how to avoid being shipwrecked by my own brokenness and rebellion against God. You're looking for the truth and you're willing to conform to it. That's not really as popular today. People do not want the answer that is going to constrain them, that's going to stop their autonomy and stop their happiness quest.
That's good.
Yeah, fascinating stuff there. You've talked there about your interactions with Christians in the church and the resources available. Talk to us about what you do on your blog, what your goals are behind there, because there's a real mixture of maybe cultural commentary, what's going on nowadays, and then apologetics resources. So talk about your experience in doing apologetics on the internet.
Yes. So I come from the school of the old school classical apologetics, where we begin with things like the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning, the moral argument, perhaps the habitability constraints, the privileged planet, and those kinds of things. And that's how I was trained. However, what I was noticing with that whole narrative I was saying about the happiness quest is that instead of getting someone who comes to you with an abortion or an infidelity or like a kind of a shipwreck of their happiness quest and then saying, I need to know the truth, what's happening is more often than not, people are turning to government for perhaps a subsidized program. So, for example, say you were deciding that you would find your happiness by the validation you get from betting a great number of people. And that's not unusual today on college campuses. Getting people who are attractive and popular to go to bed with you is actually a real priority. You don't want to miss out on the fun. And so what's happening is rather than struggling with the breakdown of that priority, people are then saying, well, the problem is that this is too expensive. So I need subsidized contraceptions, or I need subsidized abortions, or I need people to stop judging me for this, or whatever. They're not coming to Christianity and saying, I can't believe I did this. How do I stop? How do I find out what I really should be doing? And Christianity, the offer we make is we're saying, stop trying to make yourself happy. You're not even designed to be happy. You're designed to be fulfilled by denying yourself and following Jesus. And by taking on his priorities and obedience to the Father, you will suffer. And you will be shunned and you will be shamed. Read the Gospels. And what you find out, that is the normal Christian life. But in the end, that is what is best for you. Well, that's what we're offering. But like I said, often there's these subsidies and there's restrictions on Christian speech so that we can't even offer that without being told you're bigoted, you're intolerant, you're whatever. So to answer your question, I had to branch out into policy. And that's because these specific subsidized programs in government were not only making the happiness quest sort of prolonged rather than cut short, but it was also getting to the point where Christians could not even say, do you want to know what I think about your happiness quest? Would you like to know what Jesus thinks, rather, about your happiness quest? Would you like to know what the evidence says about this course that you're on, whether it's likely to succeed or not? That stuff is all bigoted and intolerant. And so, for example, today I might write about a piece of legislation, like, say, the Equality Act, or a bill that undoes all the state level restrictions on abortion, letting Christians know that if you're a Christian doctor, say, you may be forced to perform abortions against your conscience. If you are a Christian adoption agency, you may be forced to place children with same-sex parents. These are the kinds of things that are affecting our ability to even be Christians, and welcome people to then ask us, why are you so different? And what is your worldview? Well, if you're not allowed to publicly act like a Christian and demonstrate that competence and that peace and that purpose, it's very hard to evangelize people if you can't be yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We are facing challenges from policies and from cultural, I would say, kind of shaming. And so we have to be aware of this. And, to kind of tie it in with apologetics, I think we have to be prepared. I think we have to simply be prepared, because the charge now against Christianity is that's immoral. It's wrong to oppose what I'm doing. And if you don't have the research to be able to explain, no, this is why it's better, then you aren't able to talk about that, silencing yourself even further. So Christians really need to learn how to talk about the kinds of issues that are being used to silence us and tar us as immoral, and so on.
You mentioned when you were talking there, you mentioned about having to go certain routes about what you wrote about. And obviously, inevitably, being on social media, you interact with unbelievers, and sometimes they can become hostile.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I wonder if you could speak to how it is. What is your approach in interacting with skeptics, and how do you handle it when they become hostile?
Yes. So you definitely want the alias. OK, because I think that allows you to speak your mind and avoid having someone come after you in your workplace. So my way of interacting with non-Christians, there's a post that I wrote in 2011 that's very famous called A Secular Case Against Same-Sex Marriage, in which I list out non-Christian, non-theistic concerns I had with the legalization of same-sex marriage. That post was picked up by Jeffrey J. Lauder on his blog, The Secular Outpost on, I think, Patheos. Yeah. So he picked that up and he said, I don't agree with this. And, I'm in favor of same-sex marriage, but this is pretty interesting. What do you all think about this? So my goal is to appeal to non-aggressive, non-dangerous skeptics. Jeffrey J. Lauder is well known on both sides for being a fair-minded person who is a non-Christian. He is a paragon of free and open debate.
Agreed.
So when I'm going to write a post, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cite a lot of research, a lot of studies, a lot of legal cases, studies from other times and other places. And for Jeffrey, that's interesting. That's the kind of thing that Jeffrey likes. He's going to respond to that. So I think you want it right for that person. Now, if you find yourself dealing with someone who isn't like Jeffrey and wants to dox you, dox is like find out all about your personal life and expose that so that you can be fired, or you can be something like that, silence, coerce, you're threatened, your property vandalized and things like that, then the alias is the best answer, and just keeping that alias quiet is your best defense against that kind of atheist. So what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say, if you write things from the right perspective and focus on evidence, you will attract the right kind of non-Christian. And for the wrong kind of non-Christian who wants to hurt you, that's why you have an alias and you don't reveal a lot about yourself. And a part of that is just being humble enough to be able to say, I don't want the spotlight. I want to make a difference, but I do not want to make a name for myself.
Let's say a friend comes to you and is like, "Hey, Wintery, I've got this issue at work, and a coworkers come over to me and they're asking me these questions, and I'm having a discussion. How do I interact with them in person without getting canceled right there, or getting like things messed up? Because if the goal is to silence you, the fear of the loss that you could incur from not speaking out, it can be effective."
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. That's the real question, isn't it? How do we act like an authentic Christian in a world that doesn't want us? I'm doing Bible study right now, and we're going through the epistles, me and my Bible study partner. And if you check out 1 Peter 1, that's what we just finished. And we got a free commentary from Logos Bible Software, by the way. I don't know if they're still offering it, but get it. And we always use a good commentary. And it talks about this, the discomfort of being a Christian in a non-Christian world. But to answer your question, it's very dangerous these days. And you have to have a lot of discernment and a lot of experience to know who is safe and who isn't safe. So I have opened up to a lot of non-Christians in my 22-year career in IT. My background is a Bachelor of Computer Science and a Master's in Computer Science, and I've been working in IT in big companies for that entire time. It just takes a feeling of discernment, and I think what you can do is this is something, you're making me think on my feet, but I feel the person out. I basically say, where do you get your news from? Ask that question and just sort of see where they are, and then go, who do you know who is on the other side of you on this issue? Who's the smartest person you've read? Just sort of feel out whether I'm going to say, these are my views, or whether I'm going to say to them, and I've had a lot of success with this. Okay, so it sounds like you've never heard a Christian speak on these issues, and you have the view that they're this way, that they're bad, immoral, bigoted, whatever. Would you be interested in watching a debate? Who's your favorite atheist? And they'll go, Christopher Hitchens or whatever. And I'll say, would you be interested in watching a debate with your guy against William Lane Craig? And they go, gimme. I was working for a company near a particle physics lab where a Christian professor was doing research. And he had done a lecture for the Veritas Forum. And I shared that around my office. And I contacted him and said, would you be willing to come out from where you're doing research to our company and speak on this? And all the atheist people watched that DVD, and they were very interested to hear him speak. So I think it's just in how you present what you're doing. You got to feel out the person and decide whether you're going to share your views or whether you're going to share William Lane Craig's views or Dr. Stephen C. Meyer's views or Michael Strauss's views. Do you understand what I'm saying? A way to sort of avoid personally getting involved in this is to say, here are some views that I've seen in a debate. So what I used to do in IT, and what I still do, is put out on my desk the book Debating Christian Theism, which is a really nice book published by an academic publisher that has essays, pro and con, on a lot of issues that are interesting to Christians. And so people come by and they look at that and they say, oh, are you interested in that? And I go, oh, yes, I'm very interested in that. And they go, well, what position do you take? And I go, well, I'd be happy to take you to lunch and explain to you, what I think. But I want to talk to you a little bit more first because, obviously you may not understand some of these things or whatever. But that's a nice way of sort of saying, hey, I'm available to talk about these things, but I'm not going to take a position that's going to allow you to nuke me and my career and my immigration. I would have been deported if I'd lost my job over this. So it was a big risk, to do these things. Does that sort of answer you?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it's helpful. And I also think that it's almost like a variation of Kokel's tactics, right? Mm-hmm. Of kind of removing yourself out of the hot seat and saying, hey, I don't know, this stuff's kind of interesting, but here's something you might want to look at. And, it's a book by, like you said, someone like Dr. Craig or somebody like that, where this is just sharing this as food for thought. But there's obviously some, strategic thinking behind it. So, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. The hilarious thing is I invited out this particle physics guy, and one of the atheists who had been fighting with me during our discussion afterwards, one of the other atheists who I didn't like, he was like, well, why can't the universe be eternal? And the atheist who I was getting along with said, oh, don't be stupid. There's so many reasons for you to believe that the universe has begun to exist. You can't believe that nonsense. What about the light element abundance predictions? And what about the cosmic microwave background radiation? So my friend Joe was telling my friend Tom, the atheist, two atheists, he was going, don't be ridiculous. Whatever you're going to believe, it has to be in line with modern cosmology. And modern cosmology doesn't allow you to have an eternal universe. So this is where you want to be. You think you died and gone to heaven when you see your atheist coworker chastising your other atheist coworker so that he's the one who's going to get canceled if anything happens.
Right. I got a question for you there, Wintery. I can imagine myself talking to some atheist person and we're debating something and I feel equipped. I've read the books. The books slid across the table and I embraced them. Now, when it comes to things like, policy, things in culture, like these Equality Act and things like that, it's, I don't live in the States. I try to keep up to speed with what's going on and listen to Albert Mohler and that sort of thing. But how can a Christian be equipped in dealing with this, the trenches, so to speak? It's out of the realm of ideas. If it was a military scenario, it's like, okay, there's the classical apologetics approach to me is like, okay, we're sitting in the war room and we're able to move our tanks around and it's conventional warfare. But now it's like guerrilla warfare when we're talking about getting canceled and like, can I speak in my school? Can I? What if the kid doesn't like what I'm saying? What if I call my daughter, get thrown in jail,
gosh.
So the crazy thing is, like, how does one become equipped? It's like, this is all new stuff in culture, I don't know if I'm phrasing it right, but the idea is like, there's no book for this. So what do you do to stay abreast of what's going on and, feel like you're making the right tactical moves,
Yeah, I love the way you presented that question. So I read 2 books on military history for every book I read on apologetics. I love thinking about things in military ways, and that's been like that since I was very, very young. So I have great news for this person who asked this question, that it's actually a wonderful opportunity for us that the world has become like this. So what I would say is I would say you definitely want to keep informed, and part of that is, unfortunately, I have to say I read news sources that will talk about these cases, so that being aware is important for you to not be an easy target. That's number one, is just be aware of what's going on in other countries, like European countries and Canada, where Christians are facing, certain challenges to expressing their views, and what you should do to kind of be careful about not unnecessarily exposing yourself. So that's strictly on the defense. And I can, if you want, I can name the sources that I read and the podcasts that I listen to, but that's part of it. And then the second thing is I would say, when you talk about controversial issues, you can't talk about them like a Christian teacher or someone who is preaching to the choir or something like that. You're going to have to do better than that. You'll have to find a way to discuss these things, like the case that I wrote against same-sex marriage, that is going to be picked up by atheists and respected. So for every issue that's controversial, you will have to read books. You'll have to read books by the kinds of people who don't invoke the Bible or any kind of spirituality or supernaturalism in order to make their case. So let me give you some examples. If you're talking about abortion, Scott Klusendorf's Case for Life. If you're talking about general Christian worldview, Nancy Pearcey's Total Truth. For defending or explaining natural marriage, you want Ryan T. Anderson's and Robert George, What is Marriage? And then Ryan T. Anderson's book, Truth Overruled. For transgenderism, the book that just got canceled, When Harry Met Sally by Ryan T. Anderson. There's a great book coming out. I was asked to write a review of this. It's Katie Faust, Them Before Us. She has a unique take on social issues where she focuses on the effects that the decisions of selfish adults have on children. So far I've given 2 answers. Number one, be informed. And number 2, you want to be equipped to discuss these things academically with evidence, rather than just saying my Bible says, or I'm really passionate about, or how dare you. You know, you don't want to do that. You want to cite some studies. You want to have some arguments. And then the third thing is exactly what I said. You have to be sensitive about who you're talking to and where you're talking. You can't just go into the office and throw a Bible on your desk and tell everyone that they're going to hell if they disagree with the Bible on certain issues, especially if you're working in a large corporation. So that's what I recommend is if you want to make a difference and you want to talk about these kinds of cultural things that are likely to get you in trouble, as opposed to general apologetics, which is a little safer, then you definitely want to consider having an alias, starting a blog, just being a little bit more cautious about revealing your voice, how you look, and don't blab it to all your friends. Like just make your difference and be content with being under the radar. Not everyone has to be famous. The important thing is to be faithful. And it's really God's job to decide what your actions, what sort of fruit and results your actions produce. So I think those are the three things. Oh, and lastly, your preparation has to include debates. You have to listen to this is what Apologetics 315 has been so good at. And it's been putting forward debates to people in podcasts and commenting on them. And modeling how to discuss topics raised in those debates in a winsome and even-handed, calm way. So what do debates do? So when you listen to your opponents talk for half the time, you get very calm. Initially, when you first hear someone talk that doesn't agree with you, if you're coming especially from a church background, you may turn red. You may get hot-blooded. You may feel like you're going to lose your temper. But when you're listening to debates, gradually that eases off until you get to the point where you're very calm, listening to other points of view be expressed. And more importantly, you learn how expert Christians like Stephen Meyer and William Lane Craig and Michael Icona, how do they interact with people on the other side? And you adopt those patterns as well. So that is less likely to get up the ire of a certain kind of skeptic. If you're dealing with the dangerous kind, your best defense is avoidance. And I've explained that's a thing. You may have to have an alias. You may have to tell someone, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to give my opinion. But here's a debate you can watch to get both sides. I watched it. You may find your view represented in there. And that's the best you can do. But if you trust the person and you don't think they're going to come after you, then you need to still learn how to be more open about your showing your work about how you got to your point of view. And argue like the experts. We have incredible people. Many of them are on your podcast, like David Baggett and Craig Hazen and Fuzz Rana, who's incredible at the origin of life. You keep introducing people to them, and they just have to listen and learn how to talk like that if it's safe to give their own point of view.
What are some of the sources that you would recommend Christians using to stay informed about global issues here in the States? What are some of those sources? I'm curious.
Yeah. So this is every day, and people can look at my blog and they can kind of tell what I'm listening to. But every day, the number one place that I go, I love this site so much, is the Federalist. It's run by, it's very Christian friendly, and you often see stories about, say, overreach of government against Christians and Christian consciences there. Yeah. So I recommend the Federalist. I recommend Daily Wire, but Daily Wire is more like a news site and less a social commentary site. When you read the Federalist, if you read Joy Pullman or Jordan Davidson, these women really are trying to live Christian lives, and they are looking at policy from the point of view as, how does this affect me? And it's incredible. It's incredible. I think women in general, if you think about Nancy Pearcey, they tend to have a higher level view of what's going on in society and how everything connects. Have you ever heard that a woman's brain has everything connected? I'm so sorry I'm saying this, but it really seems to be a strength of theirs. And so you find a lot of excellent work at the Federalist and Daily Wire. At the Daily Wire, I like Ash Shao. She's really good. And I like the Daily Signal. Pretty much everybody who writes for the Daily Signal is amazing. They're really, really good. I like the Daily Caller as well. And my boss is a conservative, and he likes Breitbart. I sometimes check out Breitbart. They're pretty good. But I think more for the what would be a bridge between apologists and policy. I think you're really looking at the Federalist. And maybe Daily Signal. And then I also listen to podcasts. I like all the Daily Wire podcasts, Ben Shapiro, Andrew Klavan, Matt Walsh. That's specifically for interacting with policy and moral issues. The Federalist has a podcast as well where they interact with these kinds of issues. And then, of course, apologetics podcasts are really good because, frankly, you have to have a Christian worldview to sort of know when something is coming out that is affecting you. So, for example, I have a friend in Canada right now who is concerned with they're talking about banning conversions from making it illegal for someone who is sort of tempted into a certain lifestyle or perhaps tempted to transition genders to be able to seek out therapy to deal with their unwanted attractions. And there's legislation in progress right now that my friend is involved in countering such to make that illegal. So he himself is a person who's experienced those kinds of unwanted attractions. And so he has the experience to speak to this. You have to have enough of a worldview to basically say, hey, when I'm offering Christianity to you, I'm not trying to stop your fun. I'm offering this to you as a wise way of living such that you will be in line with God's plan for you. And you will be able to look out at others and love them rather than kind of messing up your own life and becoming very selfish and destructive of yourself and others. So I'm not promising prosperity gospel here. I'm simply saying that God has a better way for you than if you're calling the shots and saying, these are my goals and this is the way I'm going to do it. So basically understanding what Christianity is and understanding the truth claims that Christianity makes and understanding, like with apologetics, how we defend them, you can kind of tell when someone is coming after you. And you're sensitive to policies that are likely to expose you to problems. So what my friend was telling me last night was he was saying, if they get this ban passed, it's going to be impossible for us to even tell people the basic views that Christianity teaches about sexuality. It'll all be classified as promoting a certain view of sexuality. So he was telling me that he was quoting me the text and saying, this is what this means. It means churches will be in trouble for promoting, say, heterosexual activity within marriage, because that would be promoting heterosexuality as normative. So I think you just have to have your Christian worldview straight, and that alerts you to the kinds of policies that may affect you. It doesn't hurt to go to the experts and keep up to date and let them, say, hey, there's legislation pending. That's going to be a problem going forward.
So speaking of harmful legislation, a couple times the Equality Act has come up. Can you talk a little bit to us and listeners about, it almost seems like even within the Christian church, people aren't nearly as alarmed about this as they should be. Right. Can you talk to, again, us and our listeners about why they should be extremely troubled by this?
Right. And so I don't want to speak specifically in details. I want people to start to look at, say, the Alliance Defending Freedom's assessment of this. Alliance Defending Freedom is a Christian law firm that deals with religious liberty cases. I have a friend that I mentored who hired them to represent him in his case, and he won his case. It was a huge case. And this is a friend of mine who was getting discriminated against because he was a Christian. So look for Alliance Defending Freedom's take on the Equality Act. And see what they list out as the points. But I'm right with you. I hang out with a lot of mainstream kind of normal Christians. I was going to say normie. And they're kind of in the establishment, and they're very comfortable being, they're thinking nobody's coming for me. My Christianity is my private Christianity, and I don't think anything is going to happen to me and my family and my kids. They don't see any problem with anything that's going on in the culture that's hostile to their worldview or to their free speech or to their, like I said, to their ability to counter the happiness quest. That's the goal, right? I want to live my life in a way that says, hey, did you shipwreck in your happiness quest? Would you like to try the truth quest? That's what we're hoping for, and to be able to say, I've got a ton of evidence for this, this worldview, and this is the problem that you had was you were believing people who lied to you, and that's why you made a mistake, and now it hurt you. But I've got something better for you, and that's how we present Christianity. We love Christianity. We think we're doing people a favor by offering them a true view of how the world is. So, with respect to the Equality Act, they're just kind of they don't know about it. They've never heard of it. They don't know what's going on in other countries that have already embraced these kinds of laws. And so the kinds of things that you would see in that, just at a vague level, would be basically, if you think about the sexual orientation and gender identity laws that have been used to persecute Christians in, say, Washington with the florists, or New Mexico with the wedding photographers, or Colorado with the baker, that would become nationwide. And so any kind of expression of Christian convictions on these issues in terms of speech or hiring of Christians for a Christian organization, including Christian schools and churches. This is I'm not a lawyer. I'm giving my impression. Go to the ADF and read the ADF. But people are concerned about women's sports as well. I'm not as concerned about that. I'm more concerned about what it means to me in terms of religious liberty.
Right.
And so these are the kinds of concerns that I have, like that if I wrote an article opposing same-sex marriage that was scientific, that Jeffrey J. Louder says is a good article, that would get me fired, or that would get me charged, or that would get me in trouble with the law, is my concern. And I think that my job, I'm doing very well, like in my life, like in terms of my software engineering and my portfolio and my finances. I'm not looking at Christianity as something that serves me. I'm looking at Christianity as something that I do to serve God. And so my job as a Christian is to represent God's values and promote his interests. And so when I take on conversations like this and write these articles and spend my time doing this, I'm not doing this because this is good for me. But I am concerned that I'm going to take fire and flack for this. And so I think that Christians need to become a little bit more aware of the consequences of elections and focus less on individual characteristics of the candidates and things and much more on policy. Don't let someone's manner of speaking or personal life affect you. Think more about the policies that are going to govern how you raise your kids, how your marriage proceeds, the influence you have at the university, the influence you have in church, the influence you have in the public square. Those are your goals as a Christian. Remember, you have one boss, and that boss is telling you the kinds of things that you need to care about. So you don't care about the theater of politics. You only care about judicial appointments and policies, and you need to select and be persuaded. You need to select the candidates that make it easy for you to do your job. And if you don't think this is important, think about places like North Korea, where owning a Bible is illegal, and think about the policies that led to that, where government interferes in religion and marriage and family to the point where, and schools, to the point where you're no longer capable of leading your home in order to honor your real boss. That it becomes dangerous for you. And if you think Christianity is fun and that's going to make the church better, I guess I'm not trying to be mean here, but I just don't think, I think you have to think less about you as a super Christian, say, and more about the general Christian who's on the margin. These kinds of disincentives really cause a lot of Christians to fall away. And so you do not want that. OK, you do not want to try playing your executing your truth quest in a country like North Korea or even other countries where there's those kinds of restrictions. You want a free country. You want a country that lets you keep what you earn. You want a country that allows you to purchase books like Ryan Anderson's book and not have it banned as it was by, say, Amazon.com. So that you really have to think about, how is this going to affect me, and be informed about that.
Rockin', man. One thing I wanted to ask, when just your take on it, it's just your impression. But you mentioned how certain things happen in, say, Canada, and then you see them happening later in the States, or certain things you see happening in Europe, and then, you know, they're happening in the States. It makes the first thought that comes to my mind, well, how soon until the States starts overtaking other places and moving at an accelerated rate? Because it seems like over the past decade, it's like an exponential speed at which things are changing culturally, and not in favor of Christian freedoms or religious freedom, allowing us to have, speak freely about our views and evangelize and that sort of thing.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. So right now, like it's a good example to sort of. So let me work backwards. So suppose that you were in a country where the government was necessarily secular and they were completely in charge of, say, education. And they were completely in charge of, say, healthcare provisioning. You know, they didn't look kindly on homeschooling, say, or private Christian schools, and things like that. Your ability to sort of run your Christian life plan would be constrained. You would be perhaps you wouldn't be able to purchase the books you need. Like books are being, like I said, banned right now by Amazon, because academic books that are endorsed by professors are being banned right now. They're not able to be purchased. Suppose you went and became a doctor, and you were told that you had to perform abortions and counsel people to have abortions, and that was the only skill that you had, was being a doctor. I think Christians need to be a little bit concerned about when secular people kind of take over more and more of the public square and even the economy. Because when you're in a free market, you can kind of basically say to your employer, well, I don't really want to work here anymore if you guys are going to ram this down my throat. Or if you had a school that was teaching, say, some woke curriculum, and that's the example I'm going to use. You could just change to another school. You could make some adjustments financially, and you could go to a private school or homeschool. But if the government is running everything, and like, for example, take Canada, where there is simply no private healthcare, it's all funded through the government. And so if you don't like the healthcare that they're giving you, you don't have any option other than to leave the country and pay out of pocket somewhere else. And in fact, many Canadian politicians do that because the healthcare up there is being government funded, often has huge waiting lists and inferior equipment. But take BLM to respond to the church. So that's the current big issue. And you guys are looking at me right now, and you both met me in person, so you know I'm a West Indian black. Yeah. And that when I say legal immigrant, I'm talking about coming not from like Sweden. I'm talking about coming from a completely different culture. I was raised in a Hindu and Muslim home and know very much about them. So that's where I'm coming from. So right now, the big thing that's being talked about is BLM. And if you look on the BLM website, what they're trying to promote are two things: Marxism and the destruction of the family. That's right off their website. I'm not misquoting them at all. And so those things are both, I think, hostile to Christianity in one sense, because Christianity tends to propagate better in homes where there's a nuclear family and a church-going father. I'm not talking about a truth-oriented point of view now. I'm just talking strictly on studies. Christianity is passed on better when there's an intact family with a church-going father, an observant father in the home. And I blogged on that study. It was a Swiss study, basically showing that was a huge factor. Marxism, destroying the family would be very bad for Christians from that point of view. Okay. And then secondarily, Marxism is the view that the secular government should take over the commanding heights of the economy. So again, those kinds of problems I'm talking about not being able to change schools, not being able to change healthcare providers, perhaps not being admitted to the university of your choice. In China, there's something called the social credit system, where compliance with the state allows you certain privileges. Now, that's far off for us. That's maybe 20 years off. And I think, to answer your question from before, we're probably about 5 years behind Canada right now. But that's the kind of thing that I'm concerned about, because BLM is tremendously attractive to a certain segment of the church and a certain segment of the population. Now, I'm a West Indian black, and the problems that are raised by BLM are simply not my problems. Christians need to be aware enough of the issue to be able to speak to it. And it's a bit intimidating if you're white, I understand. But to be able to speak to it, to be able to say how many you're concerned about the number of black people who are being shot, unarmed black people being shot by white police officers. Is that as big of a problem as black on black crime? And the answer is there's about 10 people being shot, black people being shot by white police officers, and thousands of blacks being killed by blacks in black on black crime. The other problem is wealth disparities. We're being told that the difference in wealth disparities is due to discrimination by whites, say. But that's not true, because if you look at the census, there's about 15 different ethnicities that are non-white: Asians, Africans, Indians. East Indians are amazing. West Indians are also excellent, I might add. But they make a lot more money than whites. And so if whites are trying to hold everybody down, they're doing a terrible job at it, because all of these non-white people are able to succeed. And why are they able to succeed? They're able to succeed because they have intact married homes, and they monitor what the children are learning in school. They don't rely on the teachers. The teachers can be excellent, but really the parents are the ones who need to step in and make sure that children learn what they're learning, what they're supposed to be learning in the schools. And it really helps if you have two parents in the home. If the husband is in the home, the father is in the home. So Christians would look at these problems and we would say, okay, so you have these problems, which I've explained are not your real problems. And you're trying to propose solutions, Marxism and defunding the police, that you think are going to solve the problem. And did you know that Christianity has something to say about this? Did you know that Christianity has something to say about race discrimination and not having as much money as your neighbor? And it's so strange, because churches, I think they should be offering to people who are a different colored skin, who are poor and perhaps running into trouble with the police. They should be offering them the Bible and the Christian worldview. That's what I was offered when I was young and in grade 5, and my school had Gideon New Testaments handed out. I don't know how that happened, but it did happen. And I got a Gideon New Testament in grade 5 and read that and became a Christian on my own in grade 7 and kept reading it. It's similar to Hugh Ross's story. He had the same experience. A non-Christian family, read a New Testament, seemed like history. But Christians seem to have just lost the courage to be able to approach people who are complaining about these kinds of issues. So if you're asking me what is the biggest problem the church is facing right now, it's that we don't really believe that Christianity should be offered to people of color. Instead of saying to them, hey, this worked for me. And again, I'm not talking about prosperity gospel here. I'm talking about being in a relationship with God changes your priorities. It turns out that the problem was you. You were the problem. You were the problem. And what God is saying is, if you just stop worrying about yourself and about making yourself happy and come into a relationship with me, you'll find that even if things don't get better for you, you're going to be a lot more joyful, calm. You're going to cause less problems for yourself when you desire the right things. You need to desire me. And that will cause you a lot less problems than desiring what you were told to desire from your culture or whatever. So we used to offer that to people. We used to offer that to black people, pink people, green people, non-people, everybody, and that was our solution to problems that were raised. And we just don't have that anymore. I'm telling you, my entire life is a process of taking the Bible seriously. And that's what I would recommend to people. And we need to come back to the point where white people, I'm so sorry, these terms, it's a very controversial podcast, but I would really like church people in general to realize that what they need to offer to poor, wannabe immigrant children like me is they need to offer the gospel. They need to offer the Bible, and they need to say, this is the way forward. It may be that the things you're concerned about just aren't that important, having less money than your neighbor. And being the victim of discrimination. Maybe the biggest problem you have is rebellion against God. And maybe that's already been solved by Jesus' shed blood on the cross. And now, and you need to stop worrying about these other things and instead focus on loving your neighbor self-sacrificially. And more importantly, loving God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, and so on. So, yeah, I don't see that in the church a lot. And I really would like them to understand what they're offering when they're offering a true worldview. It's the best thing you can offer anybody, regardless of their situation.
Yeah. I love your response because, on one hand, if someone read your blog, they might think of you as like, oh, he's just all into politics or something like that. But, hearing you speak about this is like, no, this is all about the Bible being the central thing that we believe, and Jesus is at the center of everything, and obedience to him being the solution. And I love that.
Yes.
I really appreciate that. So thanks for saying it. I was going to add a follow-up question. Some people see a political problem, and so they think, oh, political solution. It sounds like what I'm hearing here is political problem, spiritual solution, education problem, spiritual solution. Basically, we've been trying to solve the problem, with the wrong tool, or at least without the right foundation.
So if you look at Wayne Grudem's book, Politics According to the Bible, he has a discussion of this. How interested should we be in politics? So with what I've been saying previously on this podcast, I've been sort of saying politics for me is interesting because I need to survive. It's defensive. But on the offense, it's all gospel all the way. And all Bible all the way. Because like I said, I'm speaking from my own experience. I'm concerned about policy insofar as it allows me to keep what I earn, to spend money on the things I need, like the books that are being banned now, and to be able to have money to give to charity, like I fund Rasha Christi events. I mentor people. I mentor Christians in college. I do a lot of discipling and mentoring of different people. Some people have had abortions, people who have marital issues, people who are struggling to be a Christian in their workplace. So I need resources. I need a job. I need earnings to be able to do that. So policy affects me because I need freedom to speak my mind, and I need money after taxes to be able to fuel all these engagements. If just read Philippians and you'll find out money is a part of partnering with people for the gospel. I'm sorry. It's not for spending on consumer goods. It's for partnering with people on the gospel. That's why you earn it. OK, it's protection It's the ability to speak to people's lives by giving them a book and to perhaps to be able to protect them from making mistakes. If you can solve a problem with money, like by helping someone to avoid them having to get into an ethical dilemma, it's wonderful. So that's my interest in policy. It's specifically liberty and prosperity and security. I don't want to be killed by terrorists. I don't want to be killed by criminals, and I need to earn money to speak as a Christian, and so on. So, but when you're looking at these kinds of problems that are raised individually, like why is my life bad? Why am I making less money? Why am I not doing well in school? Why can't I find a girlfriend? Why can't I find a boyfriend? Then you're looking at a different problem. You're really saying, like, there's no policy that's going to help you here. It's your own decisions that are the problem. You are responsible for these decisions. And the mistake that's being made is you're trying to live your life as if atheism were true. You're trying to live your life as if the universe is an accident and people are accidents, and you're trying to scrape together the molecules under your control into something that makes you happy. And that's just not what the Christian worldview teaches is your goal. And so I think for people who are struggling with some of the problems that take fatherlessness in my community, in the Black community. Fatherlessness is a much bigger problem than anything external that can be solved with policy. And unfortunately, I mean, there are policies that affect it. You could eliminate, say, single mother welfare and disincentivize, that and incentivize marriage. You could eliminate the marriage penalty there are policies that affect it. But really what I'm saying, I think, is a lot of the bad behavior, the dysfunctional behavior that we're seeing, the bad choices that we're seeing in people we want to help are caused by a non-biblical worldview that is telling them that they need to make themselves happy and have autonomy to make themselves happy. And unfortunately, there's this trend in culture to be super tolerant and super compassionate and super welcoming of this. Instead of saying, you need to show up on time for your job interview, you need to try hard in school and get good grades. We don't want to say that anymore. What we want to say is anything goes, and affirm people in behaviors that we would never do ourselves. And we know better, but we feel that tolerance makes us feel good and makes people like us. And I think that again is a symptom of the happiness quest as opposed to the truth quest. The best thing you can offer to someone at an individual level is the truth, and specifically the truth about their standing before God and their need for a relationship with God, a two-way relationship with God, not the kind of relationship with God where God does for them, but the kind of relationship with God where they say, I got to read some books. I got to stop spending money. I've got to stop being addicted to alcohol. I've got to be in a relationship with God where his values are respected, so that it's not just me taking him for granted, kind of using him like a kind of a toy you keep in a box in your closet, and you bring him out and you dangle him in front of your face and go, ha, 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 this is fun. But then you put him away and you never care about what he thinks when you're living the rest of your life. So
essentially what I hear you saying is one of the questions I had kind of thought about asking you, just knowing you like I do and following your blog for years and such, is what would you say to, Christians who are resistant to not apologetics? Sorry, we talked about it earlier, politics. Mm-hmm. And they say things such as, we just should preach the gospel and not get involved in politics. And there's actually prominent Christians who have that attitude. Yes. But what I hear you saying is essentially that if we're not involved in politics, then it has a direct impact on things like how we can worship, evangelism, how we can live, and the ability to live out our Christian faith. And so it's really neglecting one to not deal with the other. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And I think I've already talked about the policy side and how it affects you financially and in terms of liberty and in terms of security. Right. I would just say people should learn from my example, which is to say that when you are dealing with a poor child who is growing up in an environment where there isn't a lot of guidance from your parents, and you're different from the white children around you, say. And you're not feeling very welcome, and it's not clear how you're supposed to make decisions in order to get out of this. You're sort of born into it, and you're stuck. I would like Christians to see the solutions of the left, like what I was saying about BLM. Their problems and their solutions, Marxism and destroying the family, is really not going to help people like me. And if you have compassion for people like me, you should remember that you're actually a Christian, and that the main problem that people have is alienation from God and not knowing what God thinks. So teaching them about the existence of God, demonstrating that for them, and helping them to renew their minds by reading the Bible. And perhaps reading people who I read commentaries whenever we do Bible study. You guys are forgetting the precious jewel that maybe you inherited it. Maybe you were born here. I wasn't born here, and I wasn't raised by a white married home. But people are forgetting the importance of offering the gospel as truth and offering a true worldview to people as a result. And I think the problem that we're having is, we're having real trouble resisting policies that are not in any way, shape, or form Christian based. They're not Christian answers to these things. We could have policies that encourage problems to be solved by Christians and in Christian ways. We could double the charitable deduction. We could encourage charities and churches who give to charity. I think people just don't see the connection of the Christian worldview to charitable activities as valuable. They're basically saying just give them stuff. And don't judge them. Whereas the real answer is, well, we have to tell you the truth. And the help that we're going to give you is going to come attached with good advice about God's existence, his character, and how to live. So I think part of the problem is also, I want to say something about this, is so the Christians in my office, they are very knowledgeable about things like Star Wars and sports, the local sports teams. And they watch TV shows on Netflix, and they are very aware of all sorts of things that come up in discussions. And they like to know those things because they like to be able to talk about those things. And those things are not controversial. They're not religion or politics. Right. And so, yeah. So I didn't have a TV since the last time I lived in a different state in like 2003. I didn't have a TV. I eventually got a TV so that I could stream stuff, like stream online games or like replays when I was working out. So I would have something to watch, or watch like DVDs of good. Like I'm holding up a DVD right now. This is called The Outpost. It's from a book called Red Platoon, and it's a really good movie about the book. So that's what my TV is for. But it's not for me to absorb the worldview of Hollywood. And I think that's part of the problem I see with Christians today, is that they're very good at talking about things like Star Wars and comic books and mainstream shows and sports. But they're not very good at talking about things that actually affect their Christian worldview. And so I guess that's what I'd like to see them cut down a little bit on the sports and the celebrities and the artists and the entertainment. Try to maybe get a little bit more serious. And I have a set of movie recommendations that I think teach good character. If you want to still watch movies, but you want to change your values a little bit, I have recommendations on my blog in the About WK section. Good movies like Cinderella Man shows what it means to be a father. I love Cyrano de Bergerac. Different movies like that basically, show virtue in action, so that people can kind of remember that what they're supposed to be doing is kind of challenging people where they are with their happiness quest, and saying, if your happiness quest is based on an atheistic worldview and it doesn't involve discipleship to Jesus, then it's not good. And you need to consider the fact that your worldview is false, and that there's a better worldview that's true that you need to adopt and reprioritize. It kind of helps to know someone. Okay, so I was saying, I have a friend who's dealing with the conversion ban in Canada. I have another friend that friend that I'm mentoring who had to use the ADF to sue somebody who was discriminating against them. So basically, I'm connected to the people. And if you're not connected to the people who are being the victim of bad policy, and if you aren't reading stories about believing Christians who are suffering, from discrimination. My friend sent me several stories about like students who were kicked out of university yesterday for being Christians because they were pro-life, or they wouldn't. One of them wouldn't. There's lots of stories like this, and I think if you're not coming across them, that's why I talked about the athletes, the celebrities, and all this. Is because that's what they're seeing. They're not seeing the kinds of things that are interesting to me, and it's just you got to have some kind of seriousness. So, okay, there's a great movie I love called Rules of Engagement. It was made in 2000. It's a movie with Samuel L. Jackson and I'm going to forget the guy's name, Tommy Lee Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a movie about a guy, two military guys, where one saves the other guy's life. And then the guy who saved his life gets brought up on charges later for shooting civilians. OK, and he hires his friend whose life he saved to defend him in military court, even though his friend is a terrible lawyer. And I often like to point to that movie. I want you guys to go and watch it right away after this is over, because you'll see yourselves in it as apologists. This is who you are. And I feel like Christians forget, like, we're representing a guy who saved our lives. And that's the relationship that we're standing in. And so you simply do not have a right to seek your own happiness, to watch entertaining things, and to take on the values of the culture. You are here to represent someone who literally saved your life. And maybe you need to read, like, I read military history. I love reading Medal of Honor books. Like to get the Medal of Honor, most of the time you get killed. You have to go under fire and risk yourself to save other people in order to get one of these things. They're harder to get than, they're scarcer than hen's teeth. OK, so I read these stories and I go, wow, giving up your life for someone is really, really hard. And Jesus did that. And so how am I going to live now? Like I said, I'm very comfortable where I am. I've had a successful life in the ways that the world measures success. But you have to understand that you have this obligation. That's what Christianity means, that you stand in this relationship with this person who is your best friend and your rescuer from the problem that you face the most. And so when you're thinking about how am I going to spend my time, you really need to think about policies that are affecting your brothers and sisters in Christ and policies that may affect you. You've got a mission, and there are people who are coming out and restricting your ability to have an influence in the public square, how to raise your children, everything like that. And so you have to care. You have to care because you have a boss, and he's the best boss in the world.
Well put.
Well, I think that's a good place to begin to wrap up. Love everything you've shared with us today, Wintery. So we want to point people to your resources over at winterynight.com. That's KNIGHT. You know, some people listening probably think like me, wow, he should have his own podcast. Well, can you tell us anything about that, Wintery?
Yes. So my Bible study partner and I, she's a woman, we are planning a podcast, and we have both had similar experiences with respect to bringing apologetics into the church and mentoring young people about relationships and choosing a spouse and experiences with that. We're both very aware of politics. She is very involved in politics and has excellent, a lot of information, and she's much more involved than I am. And so we thought it would be a good idea to sort of explain our lives and how we incorporate some of these things that are not pure apologetics. This wouldn't be competing with, pure apologetics podcasts. But I think it is helpful for us to sort of share our experiences, promoting apologetics and how and coming along to Christianity and showing our work about how we came to these convictions, because neither of us were raised in Christian homes. And so that's what we're planning. And we're just trying to solve the problems of how to have the graphics on the podcast and how to publish it and how to market it, how to record it. And so that's the stage we're at right now. So I'd say give us another little bit of time. We're both very excited and we want to do this at some point. And so that's on the horizon.
Can't wait to hear it. And again, we'll point our listeners over to winterynight.com. Thanks for joining us.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. If there's one last thing I could say, I just want to shout out the people who helped me to prepare. My friends at Ratio Christi Ohio State University. That's Eric Chabot and Carla Brown, and my friend Dina and my friend Laura, and my friend Jose Ruba, who runs that Canadian group Faith Beyond Belief. He's excellent. You never do things. Don't do Christianity alone. Always have this team with you.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. If you have a question you'd like us to address or just a message for us, feedback, good or bad, you can either email us at podcast@apologetics315.com or leave a voice message for us using SpeakPipe. Just go to speakpipe.com/apologetics315 to leave us a message. And remember, if you include a Ghostbusters quote in your question, we guarantee that we'll read it on the podcast. We also ensure up to 50% better quality answers. Also, if you've enjoyed today's podcast, please leave a review in iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. And please share this episode with a friend if you found it useful. Remember, you can find lots of apologetics resources at apologetics315.com, along with show notes for today's episode. Find Chad's apologetic stuff over at Truthbomb Apologetics. That's truthbomb.blogspot.com. This has been Brian Oughton and Chad Gross for the Apologetics 315 podcast, and thanks for listening.
Peacock fuels your true crime obsession with exclusive new originals. John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise.
Clowns can get away with murder.
And Epstein's Shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell.
She inherited Jeffrey Epstein's secrets.
Plus the most bingeable crime series, Snapped. Sign up now at peacocktv.com. Peacock fuels your true crime obsession with exclusive new originals like John Wayne Gacy, Devil in Disguise.
He said to me, clowns can get away with murder.
Dr. Death, the undoctored story.
This guy's dangerous.
And Epstein's Shadow, Ghislaine Maxwell.
She inherited Jeffrey Epstein's secrets.
There was this whole other world going on.
Plus the most bingeable crime series, Buried in the Backyard and Snapped. And with the Dateline 24/7 channel that's always on.
Did you want her dead?
You can't not obsess. Sign up now at peacocktv.com.